Schizophrenics of Reddit, what is the scariest hallucination, visually or audibly, that you have ever experienced? Want to be featured in my videos? Become a patron at the Patreon link in the description. Don't forget to subscribe for new videos every day. No diagnosis here, but I've been suffering from constant delusions, paranoia and hallucinations for the past 2 years. The scariest hallucination I've ever had took place in a Target. I was in the canned food aisle when I saw a little girl grab a can. There was nothing particularly unusual about it. I, at first, figured it was just a girl getting something off the shelf for her mom. But then, after a while of standing with the can in her hands in silence, she turned around and stared at me with her empty eye sockets. She opened the can and started chasing me around the store with the can top. They're really sharp, and I started running through the store to escape. I know it's stupid, but it felt really real. Anyway, I ended up tripping and the next thing I knew, she handed me the can top and was controlling my arms. I felt myself cut my neck and wrists open and was basically screaming. But then, I knocked myself out of it. When I came to, I was just standing staring at the cans with tears streaming down my face. It's the most vivid hallucination I've ever had, and much scarier than the ones I have every day. My best friend is schizophrenic. I was chatting with him on a skateboard break on the north side of Milwaukee, WI. He flinched suddenly, really hard. Later told me he saw a man run up on me with a hatchet and slice me to pieces. Not schizophrenic but bipolar, and was investigated for schizophrenia while they were trying to diagnose me due to hallucinations. I initially heard what I thought was a broken radio both in my home and car for about 6 months. I had just moved house with my then boyfriend and therefore was quick to dismiss noises I didn't recognize. However, I began to be 100% convinced that the couple were living in the garage and wanted to hurt me. I refused to ever go into the garage. The one time I did, with my so, he noted a door was open, and I sprinted away with the torch, and was midway texting his mum that he was probably dead when he came back in, reasonably pissed. A few months later I had the scariest night of my life. I had just broken up with above so for various reasons, but somewhat including absolute paranoia and panic. Having just told him it was over, I went to the bathroom to cry. I looked down and my entire body was covered in spiders. I freaked, couldn't turn to him for help, obviously, so went back to the spare room. An hour after that I heard 2 voices, about 20 centimeters behind me over my right shoulder in unison growl, "It's coming." Startled, I looked up to see a black tall figure in the corner of the room. Imagine the same shape as a really tall queen's guard and very evil. At this point I ran out of the room back to my so, who understandably kicked me back out. He had since apologized, and didn't know what was going on. I was just acting crazy. I left the next day for 2 months. Moved back when my soul left and have been happy without many incidences since. I often describe bipolar as having small tasters of other mental disabilities, but the luck of only having them temporarily. My pet psychiatrists all initially thought I had schizophrenia when I was first admitted, and if what I experienced was half as bad as the actual disease, I am eternally grateful that I'm not. My GF worked with some extreme cases for a while. One woman, whose schizophrenia was brought on by trauma, frequently saw and smelled human beings being burnt alive, usually babies and children. That's because that's one of the things she saw in real life which resulted in the schizophrenia. All of the ladies she worked with and were horribly institutionalized, but now lived in a nice assisted living facility, were well medicated and got to live independently as possible. But holy fuck, that woman had some horrible things happen to her. Do you know any stories about what happened to her before? And do you mind sharing if you do? She lived in an African nation when she was young. Most of the events that happened there, she was raped a lot. I think had a child of hers murdered. Can't be sure, but also witnessed a lot of murder and mutilation. I'd assume during a conflict. Her 1 kids have dark skin. She is white, but she can't see them because black people are a huge trigger for her. One of her bad voices will take over and make her very unwell. Treatment of most of her ladies, as my GF called them in mental institutions, is one of the reasons they have to be monitored now. To put it simply, they were locked up in institutions, rather than cared for. Abuse and sexual assault were quite rampant and were never really given lives to live like they do now. They are much better cared for now, but are heavily institutionalized, some of them spending 40 years in mental institutions. The lady in my post doesn't suffer the vivid hallucinations she did, but still hears voices and such. One thing she did was always open windows in her flat, no matter the weather, because she was always trying to get rid of the smell of burning flesh. My great-grandmother died because of her hallucinations. I was not alive then, but she apparently was not given the appropriate care, and ended up living on her own. She locked herself in her house, and was found dead weeks later. She apparently had thought people were out to kill her, so she armed herself, and was so scared she didn't move. I'm assuming until she died. She was found with her legs basically pickled from the amount of times she wet and shit herself, and had downed quite a few bottles of whiskey. When her house was cleaned and sorted through, they also found dozens of stolen purses, with literally nothing taken from them. To me that is the most terrifying way to die. So convinced that people are coming to kill you that you starve yourself to death while pickling yourself to death. My cousin who is my age also has it. She frequently believes that she is more than human, and has to go back to the hospital frequently from psychotic episodes. From what I glean she hears spirits, and occasionally sees them. She also has so many suicide attempts it breaks my heart. It's hard to get close to her because, again, she sometimes thinks she is beyond human. When she is in that state, although not scared in any sort, she alienates herself to the point of suicidal tendencies. I'm glad modern days we have more of a solution for her. I don't want her to end up like our great-grandmother. I fear occasionally that I may have symptoms of it, but not to that extent. It's mostly during manic swings of my bipolar that I hear things and see things. I've never directly seen anything other than motion from the corners of my eyes, and I just hear inaudible whispers, but when it happens it comes with a massive overwhelming fear of impending doom, which is the scary part. Hearing whispers is okay. Hearing whispers and being confident that you are about to die, that adds a layer of terror to the whispers. To be honest, what I should do is stop smoking weed and eating mushrooms and playing psychedelics, knowing full well that this demon is in my possible genetics. TLDR, my great-grandmother died due to an unmonitored episode. My cousin has attempted suicide due to it. The terror is less of what you see, and more of an uncontrolled fear that you are going to die. So I guess the scariest hallucinations is the invisible, impending doom. Obligatory not schizophrenic, but I've had hallucinations from bipolar. You mentioned visual and auditory hallucinations, but tactile hallucinations are terrifying. Bugs crawling on your skin all night, being tapped on the shoulder, someone breathing on the back of your neck. Shit's awful. The scariest auditory hallucination I've had was someone breathing under my bed. Luckily I had insight. Basically, I could hear it, but I knew it was a hallucination, so I didn't, start to try to hit the person under my bed. But, God, I was sitting paralyzed in my bed all night. Not me, but a man I know. He told me that he was walking his bike past Goodwill and a group of teens bumped him and stole his wallet, then kidnapped him. All of the teens were celebrities, but he didn't know their names. They took him to the Flatiron Building in Seattle and spoke to him in the Tlingit Haida language, Alaskan Indian tribes, keeping him 4 weeks and implanting an organic computer in his brain so now he doesn't have to show it when he goes to the casino. After that, he went to Vegas and a demon took his hand and forced him down a dark hallway into a manhole in the street, with a door below that he knew led to hell, for which he blamed himself since he'd chosen to visit Sin City. I felt awful for him as he recounted all of this, and he was terrified about the Vegas part, hoping to get through. I asked gently, "Now, you know none of that really happened, right?" And he just stared at me in confusion because of course to him, it all did indeed. Not me, but my ex-boyfriend. He was diagnosed at a very young age, but never medicated. Doctors claimed it wasn't severe enough to medicate and he would probably grow out of it. He said his first hallucinations were auditory, just people calling his name. He'd be in a crowd and hear a voice very close say his name and would turn around and there was no one there. He was always reluctant to discuss his visual hallucinations. I think the whole topic made him insecure, but once when he was a child he saw dead people digging themselves out of the ground. He said he wasn't scared by it, because he was old enough to know they were hallucinations. Once I asked him what his most vivid hallucinations were. He said he was driving and began to see hundreds of white rabbits run out into the road. When cars hit them, the rabbits would turn into smoke. He said it was a very long hallucination that lasted for quite a few miles. He never fully grew out of it. Once or twice he would mention the twinkles when we were together. He would see tiny twinkling lights everywhere. Sounded kinda nice. Paranoid schizophrenia here. My scary visions are usually in the early morning, but one time at around 2 PM I was standing in front of my vanity mirror applying makeup for the day. I started to hear the running of feet. Figuring it was my roommate at the time, I thought nothing of it. It wasn't. All of a sudden a figure busts in my room. It was about 4 feet tall, no arms, legs, and was covered head to toe in dark blood-stained skin. Where its eyes were originally placed was just more skin folds. It ran around my room making barely audible grunts. If I had to think of a video game enemy that it looked like, I would say the cowman from the forest. That was my first visual hallucination, and afterwards I locked myself in the bathroom and cried until my husband came home from work. My grandma had schizophrenia her whole life, but never said a peep about it until she was in her deathbed. Apparently, from the time she was 3 years old to 80, she had animals with human faces scream profanities at her. She also had a little man who lived in her purse and stole her money. Thank you for watching. Smash that like button like it's a thick booty. And don't forget to subscribe to okpjdark if you like nice things, like new videos every day. See you tomorrow.